Tuning into this Spark Talk, Retracing Our Steps, 4 years of Liberated Paths. This is such an exciting opportunity for my organization to share some learnings from our recent grant-making work, and we're deeply appreciative to the Unity Summit planning team for providing us this platform. I'd like to start with a quick introduction of myself. My name is Efrain Chavez Delgado. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm calling in from the ancestral lands of the Nisenan-speaking tribes, including the Miwok, otherwise known as Sacramento, California. I work with Justice Outside as a grant making and program manager, and I manage the program's California Coast and Pacific Northwest regional portfolio. And really quickly, here is an agenda for the Spark Talk. Not much to review. We'll kick off with an introduction of Justice Outside and the Liberated Paths grant-making program. We'll move along to learning about the research design of the program, followed by notes on the implementation and results. And lastly, we'll wrap up with some key reflections. And so here we find this slide. We'll see on the left-hand side a quick mission statement. The organization advances racial justice and equity in the outdoor and environmental movement. We shift resources through our grant making, we build power through our programming, and we center Black, Indigenous, and people of color voices and leadership. On the right-hand side, you'll see this image that we like to use to really speak to our work and explain it a bit deeper. In the center of the image, you'll see the terms racial equity, justice, and inclusion, and those work as the foundational values of our organization, and everything we do is really built around those values. And the variety or suite of programming that Justice Outside facilitates, which you can see in those colorful blocks surrounding those first initial 3 words, allows us to move through this metaphorical doorway and towards an outdoor and environmental field that increasingly has more racial equity, racial justice, and inclusion. For this short and brief Spark Talk, I will not dive into details on our other programs, and will alternatively focus in on the Liberated Paths grant-making program. Definitely invite folks to offline, go to our website and research some of our other really interesting and awesome programs. And so we'll now move on to learn a bit about the research and design of the Liberated Paths program, which dates back to 2019. And first, I'll speak to a bit of the grounding, foundational understanding our team focused on in regards to the problem we were looking to address through the program. The outdoor and environmental movement has an equity problem. Who knew, right? For decades, systemic racism has determined who is welcome in outdoor spaces and whose experiences and voices are valued. These forces created a mainstream environmental and outdoor movement, which is today dominated by white interests and white leaders, while Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led organizations are chronically overlooked and underfunded. Meanwhile, BIPOC organizations are on the front lines of the grassroots work to build a better planet. We know that when our voices are left out, our communities suffer and our planet does too. With the Liberated Paths grant-making program, we envision a way to bridge that gap and to build a more just and sustainable movement. Justice Outside believes that we must center and prioritize building power with and allocating resources to leaders of color and organizations rooted in communities of color. Building this power within historically disenfranchised communities advances programming and policy that connects people to nature and sustains the planet and outdoors for all of us. And so in designing this program, we followed the same philosophy that we'll use in its implementation, following the lead of those who are on the ground, doing the work every day. We sought out, spoke with, and surveyed and listened to the representatives from our target organizations to ensure that this grant-making program would serve their needs. Funded by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation and in partnership with Informing Change, in 2019, Justice Outside conducted a survey, focus groups, stakeholder interviews, and a literature review to determine needs and areas of opportunity. Participating organizations were primarily environmental education, conservation, leadership building, and outdoor recreation organizations serving diverse populations. 55% identified as Black, Indigenous, and people of color led. In that research, we learned that regardless of budget size or age, organizations report that multi-year general operating grants are the most helpful form of funding. Our target grantees value authentic relationships and see cultural disconnect as a consistent issue with funders. And lastly, leaders of color are interested in receiving capacity building support and professional development opportunities. We clocked in that number at 95% of potential grantees felt that way. And then parallel and compounding research coincidentally was published by the Bridgespan Group right around when Justice Outside was doing its own research. The Bridgespan Group identified 4 significant barriers for leaders and organizations of color in attaining sustainable funding, which you can see illustrated on the table. On the far left, we see getting connected as the first initial barrier. Leaders of color have inequitable access to social networks that enable connections to the philanthropic community. Right after that, the barrier of building rapport comes up. Interpersonal bias can manifest as mistrust and microaggressions, which inhibit relationship building and emotionally burden leaders of color. After that, securing support becomes a barrier. Funders often lack understanding of culturally relevant approaches, leading them to over-rely on specific forms of evaluation and strategies that are familiar to them. And then lastly, the last barrier for leaders of colors in attaining sustainable funding is actually maintaining sustainable relationships. Grant renewal processes can be arduous if mistrust remains, and funding may stop if the funder has a white-centric view that defines strategic priorities and progress measurement. Altogether, these findings paint a clear picture of how the existence of these barriers is a sign of how racial bias has crept into all aspects of the philanthropic and grant-making processes. Now let's fast forward a little bit to some really exciting stuff, the actual implementation and initial results of the program. As a guide to ourselves in this grant-making endeavor, our team drafted the following as a statement of purpose, if you will. Creating a more just and sustainable outdoor movement requires us to transform it. The Liberated Paths grant-making program aims to help make that vision a reality by shifting resources to and building power with Black, Indigenous, and communities of color through the Liberated Paths grant-making program. We work to embody a new model of philanthropy built on the foundation of trusting relationships. Here, we found some really exciting stuff, which is the program components meant to address all the problems we have reviewed in prior slides. We have created the program to be relationship driven and trust based, to include multi-year grants when possible. Thus far, we have been able to commit to that. Long-term deep engagement in financial, operational, and fundraising capacity building, opportunities for networking. Most significantly, I would say among these, or at least very significant, is eligibility not being hinged on organization size or the ability to do impact reporting or even having 501c3 status. The last couple bullets, we support organizations and initiatives of all sizes and in all stages of their development, specifically with the priority on organizations with budgets of under $1 million. And then lastly, of course, having the priority of funding organizations and initiatives led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Here we find some present day information that really gives us an opportunity to look back on the success and growth of the program. In 2020, we see that we started off the program with 17 grantees with a total of $339,500 distributed amongst them. The following year, we jumped up to $1 million distributed to 52 total grantee partners. Fast forward to 2022, and we were just able to distribute $2.5 million to 116 grantee partners. And now in 2023, with our numbers still shuffling and kind of settling in the dust, we're just about around $3 million distributed to about 120 plus grantee partners. Excitedly, we can also see the geographical growth that the program has been able to sustain over these last 4 years. In 2020, we were in the Pacific Northwest and Southwest of the United States. The year following, we grew into the San Francisco Bay Area. In 22, we expanded to the Delaware River watershed. This year, we're about to announce our inaugural cohort in the North and South Carolinas. And currently, we're actually doing scoping work to be able to have an application cycle for the Great Lakes in 2024. And who knows what'll bring us in 2025. I'm sure growth will come, not as clear at the moment. And really, to wrap up, we can look at our key reflections from these last 4 years, in addition to the really amazing numbers and total funds distributed. Across all application cycles, we can confidently say we've had 80% plus of grantees actually being Black, Indigenous, and people of color led. Relationships have continued to be a priority for our organization. Because of that, we also have a very high touch point relationships with grantees. To support that, we've grown the grant making team from 2 staff to 5 staff. In-person grantee visits, dinners, capacity building, and more are now taking place with this increased capacity and with the safer COVID conditions we're living through. Capacity building has been very popular, and we've also realized that we need to level up our curation of the menu of resources that grantees can self-select, as we found topics of interest can vary depending on organization, age, and size, and also their geography. The impact and evaluation of our work is a continued area of interest for our team. Excitedly, in this year, 2023, we have begun some internal work to improve and decolonize our own evaluation practices. Or rather the evolution of Liberated Paths stewardship. We are projecting shared leadership components being integrated within the program, where we look to grantees to be able to influence and guide the direction of the program in years to come. And then lastly, we're really getting noticed, y'all. There's a lot of pending and exciting opportunities we have coming down the roadway, some that we'll be able to announce sometime early in 2024, we hope. But really, that brings us to the end of our Spark Talk. Thank you so much for spending this time with me as I provided us a walk down memory lane. Thanks for listening. Please reach out, and I'll see some of you all in person during the conference. Please find my contact information here, and hope to see some of y'all there. Thanks.